Okay, the topic of this talk is cancer research a joke, but this also relates to sports performance research, um, and it also relates to prevention of dementia. I read this book recently. It's about PEOs or parent essential oils. This guy, Brian Peskin, he's a smart guy, but he got me interested in thinking, how does oxygen travel across a cell membrane? Okay, and what I had learned was a real simplistic idea of, let me try to shrink my picture out of here, that basically it just diffuses across the cell membrane. It's no big deal, that oxygen can easily do that. So this is the old-fashioned version of how oxygen travels across the cell membrane. It's transported, bound to hemoglobin in the red blood cell. It then crosses the plasma membrane. It has to exit the red blood cell. It then has to go across the endothelial cell, then get into the tissue cell, and go to the mitochondria and be used to make ATP. That's what oxygen does. So there's a bunch of membranes it has to cross. So how it gets across a membrane is a real big deal. And what they all said is oxygen is such a small molecule, and it's two oxygen atoms bound to each other, that they really don't have much of a charge on them, and they can travel across a plasma membrane of all these things they have to cross. Then I read this guy's work, this Brian Peskin guy. He's an expert on lipids, and he says, oh no, what's happening is the oxygen interacts with the methylene bridge carbon on these omega-6 acids, fatty acid tails of your phospholipids in your plasma membranes, and then it reversibly binds to them, and that facilitates its traversal of the membrane till it gets to the tissue cell, goes into the mitochondria, you make ATP. And I thought, well, gee, that's interesting. And if that was true, if his theory was true, that would be a giant big deal. Because what he says is that cooking distorts these fatty acids, and then we absorb them, distort it into our bodies, incorporate them into our cell membranes. And the reason why you should take his supplement of undistorted essential amino acids like linoleic acid, omega-6, and alpha-linolenic acid, omega-3, is to have better function in your plasma membranes in your cells. And I'm like, well, maybe he's right, maybe he's not. That certainly would have a lot of consequences for cancer research, okay? So then I read some more, and I found out that the big theory of oxygen traversal across plasma membranes now is that most of it is going through channels. One is called the aquaporin channel, which relates to the channels that transmit water in and out of cells, and also something called rhesus channels, relates to the antigenic aspects, immune identity of cells as well. So I thought, well, that's interesting. They're claiming, the authors of these papers, that it's about 90+% of oxygen's transmitted through these channels, and they don't know how the other 10% is transmitted. Maybe it is related to this, I don't know. The reason why this is such a big deal, and I titled this talk, cancer research, is I could only find about 3 good papers, not even that great, and then 2 sort of closely related, and then maybe a couple more loosely related to the subject. What I'm trying to say is, this is a fundamental question about how life on Earth exists, a fundamental question about cancer biology. There's 2 big theories of cancer. One is the somatic mutation theory. That's the one that's taught to medical students. That's the one most people go by, but it's really kind of a bogus theory. It's been largely disproven by the Genome Atlas Project, where they don't see a consistent pattern of mutations in your typical cancers. And so what I'm saying is that the metabolic theory of cancer, based on Otto Warburg's work about depletion of oxygen causing mitochondrial injury, and then the cell secondarily transforming into an anaerobic cell, much like a bacteria, that's the best explanation for cancer in general that is available. And what I'm saying is, there's no money in it. No one's researching it. In general, to do research and get grant money, you have to come up with, maybe we'll win the lottery here by coming up with a new drug. And most industry, the vast majority of it's funded by these, big food, or by big chemical, big pharma type companies. So regular basic research to answer an essential question. If you could figure out how to improve oxygen delivery across plasma membranes, that would cause a giant improvement in sports performance. You would be able to probably dramatically reduce the incidence of cancer and better treat cancer. You'd be able to better treat brain cells and help prevent them from becoming demented, because I think a lack of oxygen is the main reason why brain cells become demented. There's other things, of course, that relate to that. Mitochondrial inhibition, excitotoxins, all this other stuff. But you would be able to protect those brain cells better. So what I'm trying to say is the basic, most obvious question you could want to answer, how does oxygen get across a cell membrane? There's almost no attention to this, almost no research is done on it. And that's why, you tell me, they spend how many 500 billion or more dollars on, cancer research, and they have barely found anything useful. The incidence of cancer and cancer death is going up. And they don't even try to answer this basic question. And the same thing, too, for, dementia. They're always just trying to research a drug, to sell a drug. A lot of money goes into sports performance, but most of it, is going into, testosterone supplement and all this other stuff. Why not study this? So here it is, an easy, obvious question to study. They've got the equipment now to really study this in detail, and no one's paying attention to it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the reason why it's relevant to nutrition is, like I said, if this had been true, that it all depends on not having distorted, adulterated omega-6 fatty acids in your membrane, then eating raw would have been promoted by that. But as it turns out with these channels, then it doesn't change what I believe, that starch is the best way to go based on my study. So I thought that was interesting, because there are some people promoting raw vegan diets, and I'll need to study them more. But this is one of the reasons why I haven't gone down that path, is because I haven't seen a big reason to pull me into it. But I still need to study it more. I have heard some people say really good things about raw vegan, but you run into the problem if you're not satisfying your hunger with the fruits, and then you start eating the high-fat stuff. Are you going to run into the problem with all the high-fat stuff to maintain your weight and stuff? I don't know. So I'm not going to get into that anymore. But what I'm basically saying is, yes, I do think the funding for research is a joke, that it doesn't try to answer the basic questions like this, because there's no money in it. And these determine so many other things.